What a topic we have to talk about today. I think you said it best, generational differences, 14, 8-year-old. And we kind of, when we were talking about this topic, we spend so much time talking as BDRs, AEs, leaders. What's working now? How did somebody book as many meetings this week? How can I hit my goal for this month, this year, this quarter? But what does that look like in 5, 10, 15 years? I know that I will be in this profession for another 5, 10, 15 years, so what's working right now is not going to get me and my team to their goals. And so what's really just sparked an interesting conversation with these guys is, what does innovating sales approaches for the future really look like, and what does that mean? And when we kind of started to talk about this, Jeff had some really, really interesting points about SDR innovation. And so, Jeff, I mean, what does SDR innovation mean? What does that look like? And what are some companies that are really, really excelling in this topic?
Yeah, I think when we started prepping for this conversation, in my role as a GTM officer, I'm not practitioners, I think, like Joe and Krystelle can probably go into detail. I'm looking for the step function type benefits, right, in the future, right? Not the incremental, hey, we're going to improve our open rate by 0.2% or anything. I'm looking at, are there step function opportunities within this SDR role? And it got me thinking about, an external company and then my current company, and I thought about how they're doing innovation, right? So the external company I was lucky to work with, 3M, which I imagine some of you are using their products every single day. I was a project lead for them a while back, and they told me that their scientists are allocated 20% of their time to innovate, right? Like free innovation. It's part of their culture that they have to innovate outside of what they're currently doing in their current workspace. And I thought that was pretty fascinating, that 20% is a lot of time, right? One day out of a week, right? Where you're letting your people just go and be creative and trying to figure it out. So I thought that was an interesting example. And then I recently participated in a share out with my own engineering team at Rev, where every quarter they do what they call Innovation Week, right? Where same kind of concept. Hey, don't worry about what we're trying to accomplish as a business, but take a week to work on projects that are meaningful to you. That obviously our whole point of it is they're going to somehow incorporate this new innovation into our tech stack and make it a lot better. So I always wonder to myself, are we giving our SDRs in this function a chance to have that level of creativity, have that amount of time to be creative, while we're constantly pressing on them to, right, make your dials, send out your emails, hit your numbers, all that kind of stuff. So I think, how do we approach this? How do we, as managers and executives at companies, say, how do we help our SDRs really innovate and give them the freedom to do so? So I'm kind of curious. I think it's going to be a change that I might have to propose, so for example, to my CEO and say, hey, I think I need a week out of a month for my team to experiment, right? Not the experiment with variants and all that kind of stuff, but actually let them be creative and figure out some new ways to be good at this job.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about maybe there's a fear behind that. Why do you think there is going to be probably a strong reaction?
Yeah.
We can't take our SDRs out of the field for that long. We're going to lose productivity. We're going to lose pipeline. Why is there that fear?
It's because SDRs have this connotation or whatever, this focus that they're producing, right, the leads, the appointments, the pipeline, and we don't ever want to lose that generation, right, of this kind of continual flow of pipeline. So I think there's going to be an allergic reaction. I know it in my organization. I'm curious, how do you guys feel? You were to propose to your kind of management, hey, I want to give a day, a week to my SDRs to be creative. How do you think they would feel?
Yeah, my take is, hi everyone, Joe Kronin, Koncert, and thank you for sticking with us here for this session. I understand there's still like 1.2 million people on the live stream, so we got the live stream going. My take is this, is that, listen, go fast so you can go slow, right? So use the best tools for email, use the best tools for dialing, use a tool that you can get 6 to 10 conversations in 1 hour, so that, yeah, you can do a little bit more of the freestyle stuff. But there's this, I see too often it's one way or the other. It's either all freestyle, or it's all like, how many clicks do you have and how many, all the activity metrics. And there's an in-between, but we owe it to SDRs to make sure that they are in conversations, right, as much as possible. So it's I think, an interesting question, but I'll let you, Krystelle, if you wanted to jump in there.
I think in today's day and age, like, you have to be innovative. Like, salespeople aren't knocking on people's doors anymore. So I think there's always fear with change and trying new processes, but ultimately, like, there's always data to prove that, like, sometimes change works. And, like, we'll go into, like, the A/B testing before, but I think, again, it all comes down to, like, sales 20 years ago is nowhere near the sales motion that we have today. So I think innovation in the SDR role is a big part of, like, success and growth.
You hit a really interesting point. What worked 20 years ago is not working today, hence why we have this topic at this conference. But there is still something that we're using that was introduced in the 1980s, the phone. And that totally revolutionized our profession, but we are still using the phone today. So, Joe, when we were kind of talking about this, how valuable is the phone today, and what does that look like in 5 to 10 years? Will we still be relying on the phone to book these really qualified meetings that we are passing along to our AEs?
Yes. And here's the interesting thing. In the 1980s, 1990s, you'd have, like, the phone book or some kind of random list, no concept of ICP, no concept of the right persona. You're just making a ton of calls. So you could get people on the phone because they were not in Zoom meetings. They were not, completely booked out the entire day. You could get people on the phone. Then fast forward to the early 2000s or anywhere before the last 2 years, really. It became so difficult to get people on the phone because they just weren't available. But then the pandemic happens, and with technologies like Koncert, but I don't care if any of you guys go to Koncert or any of our competitors, there's a gaslighting going out there right now that you can't get people on the phone, that there aren't conversations available. The reality is, you get the right list, you get data from ZoomInfo or wherever else, and you curate it, you can get 6 to 10 conversations in an hour. Maybe not every hour of the day, but you do that kind of thing. And the reality is, in the 80s, 90s, you weren't talking to the right people. 5 years ago, you couldn't get anyone on the phone. Now you get the mobile numbers along with the accelerated technology, and you can get those people on the phone and then allow the reps who you hired to actually be salespeople, right? This is what they wanted to do, that they are now talking, they are improving their craft. Jeff, I think I heard you earlier say that, you put work into on a different panel, you put work into an SDR and then they might bail on you, right? Well, yeah, it's not on you, but just in general, we shouldn't be surprised when SDRs are bailing on us when they're not in conversations, they're not getting better at their craft. And Lexi, you and I were talking just before this that, where's this all going 3-5 years from now, that you're genuinely concerned? Like, guess what, guys? If reps are not having conversations, not getting better at their craft, you can assume that they'll be taking their Tesla to work that will drive them, that they don't need to drive anymore. And guess what? There's going to be a software that's going to do the detective work in LinkedIn, et cetera. And what they're going to be valued for is their conversations, right? So that's why it's kind of a demand for the reps that they need to get conversations. So that was a long answer. Sorry about that.
No, that was really good. And I thought of many different questions along those. But something I really wanted to ask is, how does the phone evolve as a channel? We keep talking about calls, and we can text on a phone. How controversial is texting in sales? Should you do it? If so, when should you do it? And what does that look like, Joe?
Yeah, so It's funny, a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, I was at a roundtable with HubSpot, and it was a bunch of HubSpot employees, and it was fascinating to me because the conversation came up like they were starting to experiment. Do we text, not text? The older half of the table very much is like, yeah, text. The younger half, and I don't know if this is reality or not, the younger half was like, no, not my mobile number that's so precious to me. I don't know what the answer is other than, it should be tested, and we should expect that things are going to evolve. Just like before the pandemic, it was a mortal sin to make a B2B call on a mobile line. It was like, this is my mobile phone. This a grave error has been made. And now it's like, mobile for everyone, and everyone's expecting mobile. So where it goes with texting, we'll see.
Yeah. Have any found any silver bullets for call slots? Have you found when your teams are making dials at X time on day or whatever, there's
Absolutely.
a handful more connects? Can you share those?
Right now. Right now, the technology exists for getting those 6 to 10 conversations any given hour of the day. So get it done right now. Don't try to predict when people will be around. I don't believe in that. If you're not using a technology, then maybe figure out like that some people show up at 7 o'clock in the morning if they're sea level, that kind of thing. But otherwise, know that there are technologies that can get you a lot of conversations quickly. So that's my answer is right now.
I'd be curious to hear from you, Jeff, and you, Krystelle, because something I just learned actually from a new boss is this 55:05 time slot. If, let's just say, the call block was 10 to 11, you'd be calling at 9:55 to 10:05, and then 10:55 to 11:05. Something that's really interesting, we just started to try it out. Nothing really new to share, but this is a 3-day thing in the works. So I'd just be hearing from you guys. You nodded your head, yes, that you have maybe that silver bullet time slot. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think for us, it's 3 to 4 and 10 to 11 are just our highest connect to book demo ratio. But to go along to echo Joe, what he was saying about the phones, like we see so much all the time, like, are the phones dead? Are they not dead? And I know emailing right now is more popular than phone. The data proves that, like, I believe 7-figure automation partnered with ZoomInfo and Tenbound and found that 60% of respondents actually prefer taking a meeting over email. But I think when it comes to texting, sorry to go back on that subject, I think it's all about relevancy and like contacting the right people at the right time with the right message. So yeah, you hear all the time, like, how'd you get my mobile number? It's everywhere now in today's society. But I think it is one of those topics where, again, it comes back to relevancy and personalization. And, if you get someone's mobile number and, you get that intent signal, that buying signal that they're looking for conversation intelligence, sales automation, whatever it may be, and you contact them, it's like more of a warmer intro than like, you texted me, how'd you get my number type of thing. So I think that is a really important aspect there. But to answer your question, 3 to 4, we found 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern and 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern are our highest connect ratio times.
Nice. Anything you want to add into that?
Yeah, I think every rep actually has their own belief in terms of the best time slots, which is funny, right? I know a rep that told me my best slot is Fridays at 4 because they know people have kind of finished their week and they're more accepting of, okay, let me take this one last call before my weekend starts. And they had a lot of success doing that. I couldn't believe it, but he showed me the data and he's like, look, I get more calls. I believe what Joe's saying, which I think this is like kind of the next piece of personalization, right? Which, we're doing all this personalization around the copy. And I think the next level of personalization is understanding the behavioral aspect of the prospect you're trying to reach, whether it's phone, email, social, like understanding which medium do they interact with more often. And also with time slots, right? I think it's also a personalization moment where some people just are better in the morning, like our friend, not our friend, Tyson, who's not good in the morning, but, reach him in the afternoon and he's like, I'm ready to go, right? But I think technology can actually personalize to that level of that as well.
Yeah.
rather than try to pick and choose maybe time slots that we think work. Like, I think there's enough data out there to help us with that.
I think we're all in agreement that we should definitely try out some texting and see how that goes and see the responses and the receptiveness towards that, which is a great segment into talking about A/B testing. We all know ZoomInfo. We've probably used it. We've heard about it. I mean, they're a world-class organization with their processes and their technology. And Krystelle was just talking about the testing, the A/B testing that they do. And I just want to hear from you. What does that look like? What does that mean? And if you were leading this sales development group in 5-10 years, what does A/B testing look like then?
Yeah, I think A/B testing is crucial for any sales development organization. And it's not just about, testing your subject lines or anything. It's about testing everything and comparing what's working and what's not working and continuously evolving and innovating. So I believe in just taking control of your A/B testing and like measuring how actions, end up with outcomes. So what it looks like for me personally, first up, we A/B test our messaging. And the way that we do that is it's important to have the data and insights into like the voice of the customer. So through our conversation intelligence platform, Chorus, we were able to identify a few months back that we saw a spike in budget mentions on our calls and timing mentions. So for us, we were like, all right, like this is, we're getting way more mentions. We're not booking as many meetings over the phone. That data helped us go into our talk tracks and completely revamp our talk tracks to like more of like an empathetic opener. And ultimately, we tested that versus our old talk track, which was like more like straight to the point versus leading with empathy. And we saw, more meetings booked and higher conversion there. So we tracked that by getting access to the voice of the customer, understanding what was happening with our buyers and the economy and the environment. So that's one example. Another example is we measured how we opened up our call with something as simple as saying, hey, Lexi, it's Krystelle from ZoomInfo. How have you been? Versus saying something like, hey, Lexi, Krystelle from ZoomInfo. How's it going today? How are you? And that small, minor change resulted in our duration of our cold calls went from like, I think it increased by 1 minute because our customers were more receptive to stay on the phones. It was like that psychological, like, have I spoken to this person before? And they ended up like hearing the SDR out. They got their pitch in. So that's one way we A/B test. Another way is we recently changed the way we approached our enterprise accounts. So part of that is kind of coming back to Jeff's point about innovating and trying something new. Instead of doing that across, 45 SDRs, we did it with a small cohort of about like 10 SDRs to test this out, compare it to our other team. And we did it over, it's kindly still in A/B testing, we did it over a month period. Because we understood that enterprise sales was not about selling a product, it was about delivering outcomes. So we changed our entire, with multiple touch points through LinkedIn, social, voicemail, we just revamped the entire sales motion from A to Z. So yeah, I think A/B testing is something that we all need to continuously do as we kind of go through the waves of, buyer preferences changing, competitive landscape. So yeah.
That's really interesting. And so when I'm listening to you speak, it seems that that's an obvious thing that we should all be doing. We should all be prioritizing. There's a fine line between common sense and best practice. So why should organizations really, really prioritize A/B testing?
Yeah, I think it just all comes back to buyer behaviors are changing. There's rising competitors all the time. And, we're not selling like we did 20 years ago, and things are constantly evolving and constantly changing. And sometimes you have to take risks, and sometimes you have to change your motion, and sometimes it might not work, but then and then you can, kind of alter your current process or whatnot. So I think it's just, the theme of this is evolution and evolving, and I think it just comes down to taking control of your process, but always revamping it along the way and course correcting as you go.
Yeah. And so that just kind of ding, ding, innovation, innovation, innovation. What does A/B testing look like in your organization?
Yeah, it's a discipline that I think it's hard when you don't see results right away. And I'm kind of curious with the panel here, how do you keep that fire going when you try 10 different things, you don't get the results that you want, and then, right, and then you feel like you're at a loss again, and then you start to freestyle, right? It's a very kind of vicious cycle, right? I'm sure I've seen it with my organization. I'm sure you guys have seen it with yours. It's just how do you, for us, is how do you keep the momentum going, right, and start to see those little wins. Yeah. It's really tough.
Because fail hard, fail fast doesn't necessarily apply when you have a monthly goal.
Right.
So
a weekly goal.
A weekly goal,
right.
weekly goal, a monthly goal, a quarterly goal. So going back into that fail hard, fail fast, diving back into that, how can we as leaders just really start to flip a switch and think, no, this isn't, we might fail 10, 50 times, but that's okay.
It starts from the top, right? Knowing that, from the CEO level down is that SDR kind of role is evolving. Like, I don't think SDRs 5 years from now is going to do what they're doing today, because all the technology that these guys are bringing to bear, they're not going to need time to really do the manual work anymore. Then it's really evolving their skill set to, right, you have 10 seconds, right? Are we going to hire a bunch of comedians in the future to try to get people to laugh in that first 10 seconds? Right? I mean, I'm serious, right? I mean, this is where I don't have an answer to, but I mean, back to your question, it's a discipline that we just need to continue as management to say, look, we get it, we're going to fail a lot, and we just got to keep going. I don't have a better answer than that, unfortunately.
I'm actually, Joe, you, in a previous life you shared with me, you were a comedian. Like, what kind of funny, cool, cretive ways that just kind of come to your head?
I'm a failed comedian that's at a sales conference. What was the question?
What type of maybe funny, creative things come to your head of what that could really look like?
Ask me one more time.
Yeah, so I was just saying, Jeff was like, maybe we hire comedians to get our prospectors' attention in 5-10 years, because that's what's going to work. Do you have any kind of cool, funny ideas of how we could really get in touch with customers that is different than today?
Yeah, I mean, I do think John's out there as a stand-up comedian that helps people write content, and I think he's on to something there in terms of when something's in my inbox, as someone who's super busy, I'm delighted every time I see an email that I'm like, oh, that's obviously going to 1,000 people like me, but they don't know anything about me, and I can delete and move on to those other important emails. When there's something that's more relevant and is capturing like my problem, but maybe with a spin of humor, I think that's powerful. So I think weaving that into the whole process, in the discovery calls, in the demos, everything, I think is important. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Krystelle, any thoughts about that before maybe we field it over for some questions?
Yeah, I think SDRs just need to continuously be creative and stand out from the thousands of other SDRs, and other directors, VPs, managers' inboxes. I've personally seen some really impressive creative outreach messages in my inbox. I know like video is really popular with Vidyard, and inserting little like gifts as well, and like gift cards. Like, I think there's always things that I see that I'm like, wow, that's creative, and it makes you actually want to take a meeting and be like, props to you, you did an amazing job. But yeah, I think overall just like the creativity piece is what allows SDRs to stand out.
And with that, I mean, we would look to the audience, have any questions about some of the things that have been mentioned?
My response would be, I think you're right on that you can't make anything that's kind of like seasonally sensitive, right? That it needs to be something that's but most of the time you can find something that's evergreen, right? Throughout the course of the year. And again, it's that test of, I'm going after you specifically. I know this about the problem that you solve, right? That's going to work for the next 5 years, probably. That it's that you're separating yourself from the pack of those 99 other emails that you get, that they don't know anything about you, your problems, even anything simple on LinkedIn or whatever. So it's like, okay, this person has conviction that they can help me, as long as it's something is probably, rather than it being something very specific and detailed. And then you do that research once, and then you work with that same contact info, forever, or until that person's gone. You're not reinventing the wheel every time. And that's, I think, what we see is SDRs come in, they do all this research, they're gone 9 to 12, 15 months later, and someone else is doing the new research again. That's going to change for sure.
Yeah, I have maybe a controversial take here, and to answer your question here, James, I believe the dynamic nature of messaging should change actually more frequently than we are today, right? Same thing in our world, we believe that your ICP or your target account list should change because it's dynamic. So this is kind of to the first point I was trying to make when we started this session is, should I have a quarterly session with my SDRs and say, hey guys, this is flush what we've just did for the last quarter, and let's reinvent who we are again based on everything we know now and what the circumstances are, and reinvent how we want to approach this quarter, and then we do it again and do it again every quarter, right? That's very expensive, but maybe that's where we need to be, is just more dynamic. I'm going to have to test it out, but I believe that the dynamic nature is kind of where we're headed.
And if it makes sense to go there, I would say you need to hire researchers to do the researching, not sales development people who want to be in sales and aren't particularly good at that activity. Right. That's my take.
I think that's a really good point. Right? I think we rely on our SDRs to try to take on that role, and they're not good at it, right? To whatever the Shakespeare / kind of comment. Earlier.
Sherlock Holmes, right?
Yeah,
that was a good one. I'm keeping that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.